Welcome, everybody, to Nothing Less Than Extraordinary. I am super happy to have Samantha Buck with me. It's been a while that we try to set this up, and it's finally here. And she has a time difference. It's 7 in the morning for her. Thank you for making the time to being here and being woken by a super noisy alarm. So I guess she didn't get much sleep, but she looks amazing. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you. I'm excited.
So today's topic is going to be connecting with your inner warrior, self-empowerment, and self-acceptance. And I love that because I'm always preaching about self-acceptance. It starts with us inward, and that's what radiates outside and what we manifest and wants to create. So a little intro about Samantha. So Samantha is it's Samantha Buck. She's a life coach. She's a writer and an owner of her business. She's the warrior. She's a certified life coach trained through the International Coach Federation. Did I get that right? ICF?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. A writer, an empath, and a dog mom. And she works with women to overcome self doubt and overwhelm so that they can actually connect with their inner warrior, feel confident to conquer the challenges, and have more peace in their life. They're very much aligned to similar to my mission, but me, I with regards to love in the dating. So working through our internal shifting that inner acceptance and all of the self-doubts and the fear that we may have and the baggage that comes with it, and then to attracting the right mate, raising our vibration to attracting the right mate in our life. So I love that it touched base on all of those things. So super, super excited, so thrilled to have you here. And like I said, this is her first time on the podcast. So congratulations and kudos to you for being so brave to be on. So I'm so excited.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this for sure.
And I'm so excited it's happening. So let's get into the topic. So I want to be able to understand a little bit about Samantha, who she is, how she kind of grew up, and what led Samantha to becoming a life coach. What does that look like for Samantha?
Yeah, well, it really did start probably in my childhood. I mean, I think we can probably trace a lot back to our childhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I definitely grew up, I was fortunate to grow up in a loving family. Um, I was the only girl out of 8 grandchildren, and I did have the presence of both my grandparents, but particularly my grandfather, who
Yeah,
believed in very strict gender roles. So
right.
that really did shape um, the way I saw myself for a long time. I think my parents really did their best to make sure that I was loved and felt equal, but there was always that presence of, I think I had a wound pretty early on of feeling very sensitive and not enough to some extent. And I think that really impacted what I do today because now I help women with that same wound a lot of the time. I think we all have that. Excuse me. But yeah, growing up, I really rebelled against being sensitive. I knew I was sensitive from a very early age. And then on top of that, just feeling like being feminine was seen as weak.
Mm-hmm.
And comparing myself to my brothers and my cousins really led me into, I had more than a dozen jobs in 10 years and in very different fields, and some of them were pretty male dominated fields. I was a whitewater rafting guide. I worked in trails, and for a long time I felt, it felt awesome. I felt like a badass and I felt so
Mm-hmm.
strong and
Mm-hmm.
empowered. And I was really proud of myself for doing those things. And at the same time, there was kind of this underlying, like, I always felt like I had something to prove.
Mm-hmm.
And there still was that underlying thing of like, I'm not sure this is for me, but I'm doing it because it makes me feel like a badass.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't for a very long time that I really realized that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, I have lots of stories and I had lots of adventures, and it was so much fun for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, eventually I think that feeling just started coming up,
Yeah.
and I realized I needed something different. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I did have a couple pivotal moments. One of them that comes to mind is I was working in Colorado at the time, on a trail crew.
Can I
So I
just
was,
interrupt you really quickly?
yeah.
Because I don't
Mhm.
want you to forget those thoughts, but I'm just going on intuitive thing because I just love what you had said. Because I hate interrupting my guests, but remember
Mhm.
those pivotal moments because they're going to be crucial. But something of what you said just now, isn't it so true for every woman that's gone through, equally just for the men to have to feel like, you know, that you weren't good enough, that you had something to prove all the time. But in your case,
Mhm.
you're constantly faced with this, and you're an empath. So for those who
Yeah.
don't know what an empath is, because I'm also an empath, is you feel so much of everything around. There's like they're magnified to an extent that you can hardly understand why that is. You can feel people's pain just walking
Mhm.
past them, and that energy, and it's so strong. And so you kind of see that as like, oh, maybe there's something wrong with me because I'm like way too sensitive. How come? Like for the longest time, I struggle with I was constantly being told that I was too sensitive, but I knew that that was never a weakness. I knew that that was also a strength. I just need to be able to utilize it properly. And when I read a book about empath, I'm like, oh my God, because there's such a small percentage of empath. And like, oh, I belong in this group. I and that all makes sense for everything in my life. So in short, I really want to touch on this because so many of us do so many of these career, and you were saying about how you felt like a badass, and I think that's great, and I can feel the energy of the strength of who you are because all of that made you to become the strong woman that you are, but also learning to embrace the softness as the heart, the masculine and the feminine together.
Yeah.
um but I think for most of us, we struggle with all of it to make sense of who we are. And here you are finding your path to taking that magnificent strength and yet soften it to find the middle ground for you.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that. And I can definitely resonate with what you said about realizing you're an empath too. That was definitely a pivotal moment for me as well
Yeah.
along my journey. Yeah.
So going back to your milestone, like that, those core thing that actually happened that shaped in your identity. I love to hear it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt on that.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. So, yeah, I was working in Colorado at the time on a trail crew and doing all these really cool projects. And I just happened to meet, and at the time it felt like a coincidence, but I have come to learn that it was not a coincidence. This was the universe sending me a sign. Um, I happened to meet this woman who was a volunteer. Just it was funny how it happened because I wasn't even supposed to be there that day, and then she ended up being the only one who came.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I met this woman who was a lawyer, and I just jived with her right away. And she was so cool and fun and smart. And I spent basically the whole day with her outside working. And
Mm-hmm.
we just talked about ourselves and our lives and the things we've learned. And I just felt like I learned so much from her. And she really opened my eyes for the first time of like really how you look at yourself,
Mm.
because up until that point, I didn't even realize I had this thought and belief, but I didn't believe that I was smart enough to be anything like a lawyer or have my own business or anything like that, any of like the like big girl things
Yeah.
at the time. And it was just so eye-opening to meet this woman, and she really just changed my perspective on a lot of things and how I was looking at myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was definitely a pivotal moment for me because she actually inspired me to want to go to law school
Mm-hmm.
for a brief period of time. I did not go, obviously, but she started tutoring me, and I was preparing for the LSAT and everything. And just in doing that process, it was probably like over 4 or 6 months,
Mm.
and learning all these things and like realizing, oh my gosh, I can actually do this. Like I'm passing these tests. Like,
Mm.
wow, I can actually do this.
Yeah.
Was just so eye-opening and inspiring. And it was from that moment, I think my horizons just expanded.
Mm-hmm.
And what I believed was possible for myself just kind of exploded from there.
Yeah, I
So,
love it. It's like the grasshopper. Like it make me think of the grasshopper that has like a ceiling and they only jump to
uh-huh.
a certain level until they actually realize they can actually jump way higher than that. So that it's beautiful to hear. And then I love the fact that you said you did LSAT because I did LSAT as well. And I always dream of becoming a lawyer. Uh, God, they're so hard to pass those LSAT.
Yeah.
And I just like you, I didn't pursue it, but it was one
Mhm.
of my dreams. Like I've always wanted to defend justice and stand for justice and really represent, give a voice to those who were disempowered. So kudo for you. It's and this amazing lady. How funny how life, destiny, the divine show you the path of something much greater. Change your lens of viewing how you view yourself. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny that you did too. It is funny how life happens. I actually remember I kept in touch with her for a while. I ended up moving away after about 6 months, but I ended up sending her an email. It was probably like a year later.
Mhm.
And I just reached out and I was like, I just want to let you know that you totally changed my life.
Mhm. Mhm.
And meeting you just like changed the trajectory of my life. And thank you so much. And she responded back and was like, "Oh my God, I've been struggling so much, and your email just
Oh.
honestly changed my life too, because it's just a testament to what I'm doing." And
Mm,
so it felt very like full circle at the time, and I'm just so grateful. Yeah.
a beautiful story. Do you have another pivotal moment? Is that the core pivotal moment that really starts shifting everything for you?
I would say I have probably two more that come to
Mm,
mind. So the second one was also around that same time, actually. I was living
mm,
in Colorado. Um, It was when I had first moved there, and I was very young and
mm,
fairly naive, I would say. Um, I got into a relationship kind of right when I got there. I had a new job, was making new friends, and I was very much caught up in the somebody liked me kind of thing.
mm.
Um,
Don't we all do?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was really fun at first, but I did not realize all the red flags, and it ended up being a very toxic situation.
Mm,
And it didn't last for very long. The actual relationship was only like 3 months, but the aftermath, he would not leave me alone for months and months and months, to the point where I had to change my phone number and
mm,
was scared.
mhm.
And I ended up moving away not because of that, but it was after I moved away that I realized how much that had impacted me,
Yeah.
because I had never been in that situation before.
Mm,
And I did not realize how much I had really lost myself, like completely lost myself. I looking back, it was like there were so many moments where I said yes to things I did not agree with, and I went against the things I believe in, and I did not stand up for myself, and I just completely I had it was like I had zero sense of personal power.
yeah.
Um which is something I help my clients with now. So
Mhm,
definitely pivotal for me at the time.
mhm.
Um but
Let's
yeah, that
talk
was
a bit about that too, because that's
yeah.
another really huge pivotal moment for you, but also huge for a lot of women.
Yeah.
We talk about toxic relationship. I've been in a toxic relationship for 17 years. And so leaving that is hard. But what I really appreciate of what you said, it could be a one-time meeting, such as your lady, that can really change your whole entire life, or being in a relationship like for 3 months and realizing how much of a huge impact. And for most people, it's like 3 months, like how much of an impact, but it really
Mhm.
does. It does a whole lot to your self-esteem, your self-worth, and how you view yourself. It really brings you completely down. And so I love that you brought that up. And, to how can we actually, because that's what you do now to empowering women. And I love that topic is finding your voice and not doing things because you felt pressure to do it and you're not being aligned with your own values and truth. So we'll dive into that a little bit more later, but I think that's a really, really interesting topic in the sense that How do you regain back your self-worth and your power and to stand in your truth?
Yeah, so true. So many of us go through that.
Mhm.
Well, for me, I remember I made a decision. It came down to, I like to call it my mountaintop moment, because it was like I got to this point where I felt so defeated
Mhm,
and ashamed for the part that I played in it, because I quote unquote let all this happen
mhm,
and didn't stand up for myself. There was so much shame around it.
mhm,
And I remember thinking, I don't want my life to be like this.
mhm,
So what decision do I have to make? And I remember thinking, okay, I am never going to allow someone to treat me like that again. I'm
mhm,
never going to allow someone in my life who treats me like that again. And
mhm,
obviously, we can't control other people's behavior, but we can control what we allow in our lives, right?
mhm,
And that's a big part of what I've learned since then is really boundaries are extremely important. And
yeah,
it's not just like the physical, the mental and emotional boundaries, but it's also energetic.
mhm,
Um, I mean, as an empath, energetic boundaries are important, but even more than that is like the decision, like what are you going to allow in your life?
yeah.
And that was really big for me.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think like I want to be able to highlight this for people is that when you're going through this thing and the shame and the guilt that comes with, there's so much shame and guilt, and
Yeah.
we as female are so good at this game. Cut it. Cut it out. Okay, easy for me to say now because I did a lot of the work. It took me years and years. But I want to be able to pass this message on to people that when you do find yourself in those type of relationship, or that you're losing your power and you're not standing in your truth, um, is that these things, they kind of start off like so subtle. Like when you actually met him, he was wonderful, thing was going well. It's like little things seep in as you go, and then all of a sudden you find yourself like, what happened? Like they're so subtle and you don't even notice. It's almost happening at a very unconscious level until the day you
Mhm.
wake up and you realize, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. So I want people to know that it is normal and it's okay. So the only way to get out of it is to learn to embrace what happened and not be so harsh on yourself, and to give yourself grace that we all experience that. You're not the only one going through it. Most of us experience it. And when you start to realize what's happening, then you have a choice. You always have a choice. um, then you can choose to do something different. And in the case of Samantha, like she realized, and that's what I want to be able to touch upon for women is, how do you know that you really hit rock bottom? It is unique to every person. But what was the point for you? Like for me, I'll tell what it was for me that said, I can't do this anymore. I was feeling like I was hanging on to the ideal that when you marry a person, it's till death do us part. And I have
Mm.
an idealistic, and I became aware because I worked a lot on my self-awareness, learning to know who I was, is that I idolize fantasy, all the fairy tales of happily ever after. So I was clinging to this vision of one person until forever and we live happily ever after. So no matter how hard it is, we can still make it work. But the truth is that ideal, as optimistic as it is, you also have to embrace the reality of life and make sure that they are matching and that they are concurring. If the person
Yeah.
wants the same thing as you, great, then you're working at it together. But if this is your ideal and they're not showing up the way you want it, then you could be paddling all you want with all of the optimism and they're paddling on the opposite side. You guys are not going anywhere. So for me, the breaking point was realizing that I felt when I was with the person that they brought always the worst out of me. And I didn't recognize who I was becoming. I didn't even know what my preference was. Because every ideas and thought, because he was 19 years older than me. So I put him on a pedestal And I went with everything that he said because I figured he knew better, that my idea wasn't valid enough. But that's my own doing. Like I am in the relationship. We play both role, but I do have to take the majority of the responsibility on myself. If we want to change ourselves, we must take the responsibility that belongs to ourselves. Doesn't mean that the whole relationship was all our fault, but we have to acknowledge what we took part in and allow in our life, exactly what you said. So when I realized the day that if I stay in this relationship for much longer, that I felt like a candlelight was going to extinguish. I was either going to die off. So I had two choices. The choice is to be in a relationship that I gave all my power to the other person and just submit to whatever they tell me. And I wasn't that kind of girl. I like to run my own show. I like to be independent. I like to fly and have my own wings. And that wasn't going to happen to me. But if I did choose to do that, then I have to accept that that's the life I'm going to have for the rest of my life. And I possibly will be extremely miserable or will really get depression and die off. And I couldn't do it because I had two children and I didn't want them to see as an example of a loving relationship, my ideal of the fairy tale that I think there is good things to do. Is that I do believe in the happily ever after. It is possible, but with the right partner. And I didn't want my daughter growing up thinking this is how a man is supposed to treat their woman, lacking respect or not appreciating them, and then putting them um in like behind other priority. And I didn't want my son growing up realizing that this is how a man is supposed to treat a woman. I wanted something different for me, and I also wanted something different for him because he was not happy either in that relationship I was changing, and for my children. So that was my breaking point. So to come to you, what is it that you said, oh my God, I don't recognize who I am? What really turned you and you said, I just can't do this. This is not the life I want.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story. That's really powerful. For me, I think there are a couple things. I can definitely relate. I did not recognize myself. He brought out the worst in me as well. That was definitely one of the signs. I am not a person who yells like ever, but with him, I don't think I've ever raised my voice so much. And I like literally would scream on the phone and just brought out the absolute worst. And I did not recognize who I was. But I think the breaking point, the point, because we had broken up a couple times already in those 3 months, and I kept going back to him. My breaking point was actually with my friend who had been with me. Like, I'd been sleeping on her couch. She had seen me cry so much for months. She had supported me through all of this, and she didn't like him from the beginning. She saw the signs and I didn't. I was having a conversation with her, and I remember like I was faltering again and thinking of going back to him again. And she said, Sam, if you go back to him, I will lose respect for you. And at the time, like, I'm getting chills thinking about it. It felt so harsh, and I was so angry at her. But the reason I was angry was because when she said that, I realized I had completely lost respect for myself. And that was so impactful for me. Like, when I think about that moment, I still get full body chills.
I get it.
And yeah, that was so powerful because I realized, oh my God, I literally have no respect for myself. And I realized I don't want to live that way. And it was at that point where it was like, I knew I had so much healing to do from there, and I could not go back because I would just break. I would just fall into even more of a shell of myself, and I couldn't handle that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
that was
here, yeah.
good. Yeah.
Thank you. And that is so good because I love this dialogue. And I always believe in divine, Samantha, like the timing is perfect. And the things that comes out to you, it's really like being passed on from elsewhere. I've always loved my podcast interview. It is I have a structure of question of what we're gonna talk about, and it never quite go the way it is because it's not meant to go in that way, but we do have a
Yeah.
structure. So I want to thank you from what you said, because the woman's needs to hear it. And I wish I heard these things when I was back in my 20s, because what you had said is like, we, our friends, they see them, we can't see them ahead of time. How many
Mhm.
times I had parents and all of my best friends and all of my friends telling me that he was the wrong person to be with. And my sister, who was back then only 15 and I was 21, and she asked me so bluntly, "Are you sure this is the guy you want to be with? Because you guys are so opposite to each other." Well, opposite is a good thing. Like, I love variety, I love diversity. So for me, I was like, great, opposite, perfect. Let me go get those skills and then complement it with my skill. And she said, "No, I don't mean it in that way, because I know you love variety and stuff, but I meant like, you're so caring of other people and he's so self-centered. Like, is that the person you want to be with?" But I'm like, but you don't know him. You don't know him the way I do, right? Isn't that the
Yeah.
one we always
Uh-huh.
it's like, you don't get to see all these good sides. So I didn't even listen to anything that she said. And that is another red sign, is that, okay, maybe you don't have to listen to what everybody has to tell you, because they're trying to do their very best. But if every single one of your trusted friends and your loved ones and your parents are telling you they're not a right fit because they see something, and you have to pay attention, maybe you don't have to follow, but you have to keep it in mind. Look for those, discongruent. I didn't do that, and I would have still repeat the same mistake. I will not lie. I was a stubborn kid, still is today. When I make up my mind, it just stays stuck there. But the other thing I want to mention too is to people, is that we find ourselves equally, for men and women, going back to the same unhealthy relationship. You need to pause. Like, in your case, it's when that moment when your friend said that she would lose respect for you. And thank God she said that, because she's
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the most loving way and she didn't want to have to say that to you. And it takes a good friend to have the courage to literally hurt you in that moment so that you can wake up. Um, so I want you to understand, when you keep breaking up and going back to the same relationship, you need to take a pause. And that's another thing that's really good that I find in relationship, is that when we're so much in the situation, we are so blurred by our own emotions and the pattern that
Mhm.
you have between your partner and yourself, that it gets miscued, and it's so hard to decipher what's good, what's not, and what's facts, what's not real. Is the one way to do it is to have distance in the relationship, so you can have an objective point of view of, this is what I'm feeling, and not be told and gaslight by the person that what you're feeling is completely crazy and that you're
Yeah.
totally wrong. But getting that distance allow you to have a more proper assessment, less emotion, to think about it in the much more clearer way. And then the other thing that I want people to understand is, if you keep going back to that same relationship, that's a sign you have to take a pause. Why am I going back to this relationship? Oftentimes, when we go back to unhealthy, toxic relationship, the more time you keep doing it, the less self-respect you have for yourself, until you have nothing left. And then in
Yeah.
that case, they have full control over you. And so at one point or another, the situation will not improve itself. I get it. I was there before, where I always thought that if I keep going back, you have the magical thinking. I was like that. Like, I am a very optimistic person, and I believe in the impossible being possible. And that is great in so many ways, in so many area of my life. But at the same time, if believing in the impossible to be possible is actually hindering you, maybe it's not the right concept to be applying in that
Yeah.
moment. So you need to be able to decipher that, but take a moment and really ask yourself, why am I going back to this relationship? Am I going back to this relationship because it's actually savorable, because there is hope, because he's making some kind of a change and we're doing something concrete as a couple to move past this? Or am I going back because of my own insecurity, because I'm afraid to be alone, or that I think it reconfirmed my fear of that I am not enough and I don't deserve to be loved? You really need to take an honest assessment and speak to your friends that are trusted individual that will tell you the truth, not what you want to hear.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. So definitely look at that, because if you get into these patterns and if you don't take control of your life, somebody else will. And then you completely lose yourself, and then you have nobody else to blame but to you, because you run your own show. I always say your life, you're the driver, your own destiny. You get to write it however you want. So choose wisely.
Yeah, I love that.
I love this thing about, and so tell me, like, when you actually, when client comes to you, because it's so much of your experience, it's so profound. When you have women coming to you, what does that look like? Like, what can they expect when they come and see with you? Do you do an assessment? And like the course, is it like, are you teaching an individual course, or are you teaching a group course?
Yeah, I do individual coaching.
Mhm.
So I work one-on-one with women, and my background and training, like you mentioned at the beginning, is through the International Coaching Federation.
Yeah.
And the way, I don't know if you have heard of them, but they're a very large
Mm.
organization, and the way they teach is basically believing that the client has their own answers.
Mhm.
And we are trained to listen 80% of the time and talk only 20% of the time.
Mhm.
And this is a really powerful method of coaching, because a lot of times people don't have a space where they go and they can have someone who fully listens with curiosity and no judgment and no bias that they're bringing, because friends and family, it's amazing to talk to them, of course, but whether they want to or not, or realize it or not, they're still going to bring their own biases.
Yeah.
um but with a coach, and specifically with the ICF, we're trained to show up with curiosity and not judgment and no agenda. So really, we're trained to ask really powerful questions.
Yeah.
So I don't do an assessment necessarily, but I just ask questions about what's coming up for them. And a lot of times, from what I've seen and experienced as well when I'm being coached,
Mhm.
um, we think it's something surface level, but most of the time it's not. It's something emotional. Like, we think it's time management or organization or,
Mhm.
something surface level, but really it's how we're feeling on the inside. We're feeling like we can't ask for help, or we're feeling not good enough,
Mhm.
and things like that.
Yeah, I love it. And like I think, like, I know when I have a good coach. I know when there's a good coach. Like, that is my superpower. There are so many superpowers that I have, but one among many is seeing the talent in people. And I can tell you, like, from me briefly, Samantha, but how genuine she is. But when she speaks, and the way she is, and I think it shows from the audience. I don't actually have to tell that to the audience. You genuinely care about people, but also your own personal experience and everything that you've learned. You have all of the right tools, so definitely Samantha is really qualified to do that. And what I would say too is, do you have maybe like 3 tips for the woman out there, what they can actually start doing in order to get more in line with their own self-acceptance and their own self-worth? What are some of the things that you can share with them if they're not quite sure? Okay, like, I'm seeing some things that's going on in my life. I'm not too happy about it. Where do I start?
Yeah. So one thing I love to talk about is the idea of your inner warrior. I'm
Mhm.
really passionate about this. My business is called She the Warrior, and I have loved that word honestly from a very young age.
How common?
Um,
I love that
yeah,
too. I actually
yeah,
have a program called The Inner Warrior.
nice. Yeah, so a lot of times, when you hear the word warrior, you think of like fighting or battle or being fierce and bold and strong.
Mhm.
And I think your inner warrior can be all of those things, but in my experience, your inner warrior can also be soft and nurturing and so loving and kind.
Yeah.
And for me, and what I tell women, what people in general is, you know, think about your inner warrior is your truest self. It's your strongest, most empowered self, whatever that looks like for you, because it's going to be so individual and specific to different people. It doesn't have to be someone who is outwardly incredibly bold if that
Mm.
doesn't really sit with you, if you're a little more reserved. Um, like, for example, I'm not the kind of coach who's like gonna necessarily hype you up. I don't have like super high energy like a lot of people do. I've been told that I have more calm energy.
Yeah.
And that is what I want to convey. That's what I believe my inner warrior is here. What I'm here to do is to empower women and help them feel calm and empowered, but not necessarily in a hype you up way. It's just to empower you in the way that I can.
Mhm.
So I would say think about, well, first of all, your values. What's
Mhm.
really important to you? What do you stand for?
Mhm.
One of the things, even though I'm trained through the ICF, I do a lot of times focus on a few different pillars, and one of them is clarity.
Mhm.
Because I believe that it's so hard to go after what you want, if you're not very clear on it, if you're not clear on who you are and what you stand for. And so, journaling or working with a coach or meditation, whatever self reflection looks like for you, I would encourage you to explore what your inner warrior looks like, how he or she shows up, how he or she handles different situations. What would that feel like?
Mhm.
And that can really help connect you,
And
empower you.
yeah, the inner warrior, what I really like about what you said, because it allows everybody to be different. You have an extremely soothing, calming personality, and that is really amazing for the audience that needs that. And it is so good to have the calming personality for that. There's so many people out there that needs that. My it's and I like it because it gives us a contrast. I'm the type of person who likes to pump up people. Like I can
Mhm.
pump up anything and I I eat it up like all day. But I also enjoy the calm as well. And I think that is the beauty of it all is you can be anything that you want. You can be
Mhm.
calm, you can be energetic, you can be bold, you can be outrageous, you can be loud. You just gotta own up to who you truly are, that brand, that authenticness of your inner warrior. The inner warrior is everything all at once. You don't have to be, you have a predominant for sure, but you're facet of everything. You can be sensual, you can be sexual. And that's another things that I had a hard time with is like I used to think that there was something completely wrong with me, that I was so sexual as a human being, but that is my power. Like once
Mm.
I tap into my sexuality, it it is the playground where I can be whoever I want to be and have no taboo, no limitation. Permission is given to me however I want it to be. And that's a powerful one. When you can fully embrace all color of who you are, then you're truly standing in your power because nobody is there to tell you that you can't not be that person. We could be And for a long time, I used to think I can only be a certain emotion. I had to always be calm, cool, collected, because I'm Asian. I'm supposed to keep it all together. Tempered emotion. Like I can't be angry, I can't be sad. And I always thought that was strange, but I grew up with a culture that that was what the woman's was supposed to be. You know, quiet, reserved, don't share her opinion, dedicated to her man and her children. I love all of those values. I really do. But I also love being outrageous. I love being silly. I love being funny. I love being unfiltered, say whatever the fuck comes out of my mouth.
I love it.
um, but because I give myself the permission to be playful and to be all of that, I feel free. And what I really want in terms of learning to know who I am is I cherish freedom above everything else. Like, well, that doesn't help. I mean, I don't know a whole lot of about astrology, but I am an Aquarius, so the air sign is me. So I love freedom. I've always known as a little kid, if there's anything I can have in the whole wide world that would make me so happy, it wouldn't be money. It'd be love, first of all, but freedom is what I cherish the most. And in order to be free, you must give yourself the permission to explore and to be anything and whatever you want it to be.
I love that so much. Yeah, I can definitely relate. And I think I love what you said about giving yourself permission, because that is something I've seen so much. And like, even going back to my story, I didn't give myself permission to be anything out of the box I was putting myself in, and I had felt like I was put in. And I think that happens so often. We put ourselves in a box and we don't allow ourselves to expand or be more than one thing, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and that kind of just reminded me, another tip I would say is, a lot of times, whether you're putting yourself in a box or not giving yourself permission, we can tend to allow ourselves to get into this, it's like a victim mindset, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I can only be one thing, so I don't have power to change.
Mm-hmm.
Or whether it has to do with a job or with love or moving or whatever the case may be, really, in your life, you always have more power than you think. i
Yeah,
i believe that, whether it's just in your mind, you can make a choice, and your mindset is so powerful.
it really is.
And yeah, that's something I love sharing, is when I really learn to manage my thoughts and my beliefs and change, kind of like shift from the inside out, then I just felt so much more empowered.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to share that with listeners. Just believe that you have more power than you do, and you can make things happen.
Mm-hmm. It starts with unlocking this brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
People go, how do I do that? The secret of life, the secret of everything that I understand now is that there's so many good secrets out there, but you only need one secret that really works for you. And I realize, I mean, as a kid, that's what my father gave me as the best gift. He always said, anything is possible. Unlock this mindset. It happens all here. If you learn to strengthen your mind, you can conquer anything. So, since I was a little kid, every day I sharpened my mindset. And when you think of like Marines, why are they so like, I mean, I'm sure there's a whole bunch, but the one that I can think of in terms of mindset is Navies, Marines, and all that,
Mhm.
is that they've learned to conquer their fear through their mind and unlock the limitation and the box that we place in our own self mind. And so when people ask, like, how do I do it? It all comes down to you giving yourself the permission to be able to be, to say that you can. You hold the power of being able to be whatever you want that to be, to change your mindset. It's, we get so stuck, like, I can't do it. But I like the simplicity of, like, in the Chinese proverb, everything is all in its simplicity. We tend to over complicate things. But the secret of life is in the most simplistic way, the simple things that you really can't do it yourself. So when I give myself the permission to think today, yes, it's hard, like it can be work, but if I start by saying, if I believe that anything and everything is possible, maybe I don't have the answer right now, but I will
Mhm.
make sure I will find the solution to get it. Because if I think here that there's nothing holding me back, then nothing will. And that's the one thing I've learned as a little kid. For so long, my dad never challenged me on anything. When I say I'm stubborn, he never challenged me on anything because he knows the moment I make a decision, I will make it happen. And I never understood that. I just understand that if the brain wants, if the brains believe, it can make anything happen. So if I say I will be successful in this project, I might not know a single thing about running a certain project, but because I'm so determined, because I channel everything to the universe that I will succeed. And however many times I will fail, I will always find a solution. And because I believe that, then nothing else will the universe say. It will always come down to she will make it happen. And like Napoleon Hill says, you know, if you can actually feel it, put the thought, the emotion, the feeling, and it's
Yeah,
all line, and there's nobody stopping you but you.
so
It
true.
really is. So it starts with the simplicity of just giving yourself to dream, the permission that what if I can start with, like, maybe it's hard to say I can do it, but maybe just imagine and dream. I imagine and dream, what would it look like if that could possibly become a reality? And dream is what made everything here in life happens. They dreamt of being able to go to the moon, and
Yeah,
something made that happen. So it starts with a dream. So dream and dream big. And it's so fun.
I love that. I love that you grew up with that mindset as well. It's true. It starts with your thoughts, and you are more powerful than you know.
Yeah, and they're just
Yeah.
thoughts. And the other thing I
Yeah.
want to leave with people too is we're coming close to that hour too, and I want you to be able to leave with the last word, but I want people to think about the things that hold us back are often with regards to our own anticipation of our fear. Fear is the biggest robber of all our dreams. And we all want to dream something amazing. As a little kid, we had so many dreams. Whatever happened to all of it? You can still be that. I every day think of that little kid that had so much dream, and I still let her dream every single day as much as possible. And I tell that to my kid because as we grow up older, we have responsibility and things gets a little bit harder. We forget to be playful. We forget to give ourselves permission. We get a little bit boring.
Yep.
And it's not a critique or anything. I'm just stating what's happening, right? And I find the antidote to that is still living that inner child. Remember the little boy, the little girl within you that had all of these amazing things that he or she wanted to do. And back then, all of his friend and her friend would say, that's not possible. And you know what you said to them? You're like, I'm going to make it happen because you dreamt you could fly. You would jump out of a house on the top of your roof and pretend you could fly, and you truly believe it. So be that same little inner child and believe in your dream, and those dream is what's really aligned to who you are in terms of why you were created and put on this earth. We are most happy and much more fulfilled when we find what it is that is aligned to why we were put on this planet. I feel alive knowing that I get to interview amazing people like Samantha Buck, who's trying to make a difference and serving the world, making this world a much better place to live in. That is my calling. And what I realize of coming onto this earth is that I'm meant to leave some kind of a legacy, whether it's for my children, for myself. I don't care. I don't really look for the attention outside of me. I look for what validates internally for me. I don't care if people are not listening. I feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do. And that's really what truly matters to me because it aligns with who I am. So when I found my life purposes, which is spreading love and helping single find a compatible partner who will cherish them and pour on the love that they so deserve, this is what expands my heart. And when you feel like your heart is expanding and you're in that energy of joy, that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Oh, I love that. I got chills as you were talking. That's so powerful. And I can definitely relate. I mean, I can feel your passion and I feel it too. I know I was put here to make a difference
Mhm.
and share with other women that you can be
Yeah.
anything you want to be, just like you were saying. You have more power than you know, and you deserve all of the good things. Love, success, happiness, whatever you want, you deserve it. All the good things. And I'm getting tongue tied because I'm so passionate about it, but really you can accomplish anything you want to. And
The moment when you
I
start,
love seeing it.
yeah, and the moment you start realizing that you're worth something. Somebody said to you that you're worth it. And I didn't realize during the 17 years that I was worth having the love of my life, which I get a second chance now. But it took me a year of constantly every single day repeating to myself that I'm worthy, that I deserve good love, that I deserve a good man that will put me number one, that he would support me in my dream, that he would love me unconditionally for who I am. I didn't think that was possible. It brings like tears to my eye because it's happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But it took me a year of repeating that to myself because when I left my marriage, I was told by my ex-husband, who is gonna want to be with you? You got two kids, you got stretch mark. And the only guy that's gonna, yeah, and he said, like, going on from your 40, it's downhill from, well, he said, in your 30, it's downhill from here.
Mm.
When you've been with somebody who's constantly gaslighting you and putting you down, and you hear it often that you start to believe, it's not true, but you start to believe and question yourself. Ooh, and it questions itself whether that is true. And so his words stuck with me. So it took a year to constantly not do self-sabotage because so many times I nearly sabotaged my relationship because I had a really good man and I just thought, what's wrong with him for wanting to be with me who has a huge like defect? I was a broken piece. Like, who would want to be with me? Because I didn't learn to love myself. I didn't learn to see my own self-worth. And when I tap into my inner child and seeing how amazing she used to be and all of the people and all of the other children that surrounded me, because I was like always playing the teacher and teaching everybody everything, and I love to be bossy.
Oh.
But I was in my element, right? It's
Uh-huh.
have to embrace that. And I realized when I stood for myself and I said, I'm worthy. The man that wants to be with me has to earn my willingness to give my time, my present, my heart, and who I am. And when you get that in your head that you are worth something, then you attract a partner that is going to respect you at that same level. And the other thing that I want to say about fear, we all feel fear. And just because I conquer all of these different things, the mindset that really changes for me is that I don't have any fear of challenges. Do I want to go through challenges? No. But I've come to understand that life is made of all these peaks and valleys. And then
Mm-hmm.
when they do come, because overall they have more amazing thing to offer you, the universe is there for you, working for you and not against you, even though it feels like sometimes they are against you. But because I have this internal framework in my head that no matter, and this is all mindset, that no matter how tough the challenge may be, I know the universe is on my side. And so it will, and Buddha will always be there to help me find the path. So I just need to trust the process and work through it bit by bit. There are a day when I can only do a couple minutes at a time, a couple hours at a time, a couple of weeks and days, but I know I'll get out of it. So it starts by believing that you can conquer anything, no matter how the challenge is. And whatever that challenge is going to make you that much more stronger. Doesn't mean that there are days when you feel like not like a piece of crap. They will happen.
Yeah.
And let yourself be, but don't stay in it for too long and rely on your support system. I know when to be strong. I know I'm strong, but I also know when it's okay to be vulnerable and to pick myself back up and ask for the help of my loved ones who are just dying to give me a piece of hand because they know that when they're feeling down that I will be there to stand for them and behind them no matter what. So when it comes to fear, I am like going on a tangent. I want to be able to pass this on for fear. Whatever your fear may be, and we all have it different, but you got to really go to the source of that fear. Where does that fear come from? Like, I'll tell you with regards to my fear of abandonment. I will break up with a guy before he breaks up with me. Because why? I'm afraid of being abandoned. If I break up with him first, then there's no chance for me to really get hurt because I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
being broken with first because I broke up with him. So it's not so bad. So I can lie to myself. It had nothing to do with, I can cope with it. But because I will keep repeating this pattern if I don't fix that problem, is when I look at why do I have this internal fear when it comes to being in a relationship, and when things get hard I want to run away. That is my pattern, is I run away. Everything else in my life I will fight because I like
Mm-hmm.
that warrior sense of me, it always comes out. But when it comes to love, that is my weakest point, is I run. And the reason why I run, it took me time, and it may be taking time of journaling. Like I had my therapist and all that. So finally, one day somebody said something and I had an aha moment. And I realized when I was a little kid, I saw in my culture men who didn't really truly appreciate women for what they are, coming home drunk and coming home after gambling and losing money to getting their frustration out on their wife and their partner. And I've always saw that as like, you can't really count on a men to have your back because the women are always the ones suffering. And so for me, when I see argument, I see that my inner child see argument equals to what I used to witness as a child. So what does it wants to do? It don't want to deal with it. It's an overwhelm. Like I can feel the overwhelm coming and I want to run away instead of fixing the problem. But because I know that now, I do little baby step at a time. And I made so much mistake in doing that. It's like staying and having the courage, the vulnerability to explain to my partner why I tend to run away or why I will break up with him first. And then him being receptive and understanding, loving me enough to work through our problem. So whatever your fear may be, they are fear. So always choose love over fear. How can you get more into the side of love as much as you can and try to go into figuring out what is the source behind it? Because once you pinpoint what the source is, the problem become not so hard.
Yeah, so true. I love that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, like I said before, the clarity and like you just said, the awareness and clarity is so
Yeah,
important to be able to actually move forward.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to be able to ask you before we come to a closing. Do you have anything that you can share with people? Like, do you have a program going on right now that you would like to share with people and how they could best reach you, Samantha?
Yeah, definitely. So right now I'm working with clients one-on-one. So I
Mhm.
have a 12-week individual coaching program where I help women overcome overwhelm and self-doubt so they can get out of their own way, feel confident to conquer challenges, and have more peace and freedom in their lives. I love being able to help women do that.
Mhm.
I'm most active on Facebook, Samantha Buck. My website is shethewarrior.net. And I'm also on Instagram if you want to find me, she_the_warrior. But I'm most active on Facebook. And I actually do have a Facebook group as well. It's called the Calm and Confident Women Collective.
Oh, I
It's
love
fairly
it.
new, but yeah, there'll be some goodies in there as well.
Congratulations. And
Yeah.
so I will leave you on the last note. If you can share with the public and our audience a quote that has served you well in your life, um, either in your past or in your present or for the future, so that they can actually be inspired and hang on to those beautiful motivation to keep them going no matter what their challenge are.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. The quote I love to live by most, probably, I probably have a couple, but um, the most common way people give up their power is by believing they don't have any. That's
Mhm.
by Alice Walker. And it is so true. Like I said earlier, you always have more power than you think. Because if you believe you don't have any power in a situation, you don't. And you won't be able to see possibilities or opportunities. But if you can empower yourself and just have the thought, it's possible
Mhm.
to change something, it's possible. You don't have to fully believe that you can achieve something, but start with it's possible that I could do this, or it's possible I could figure this out. Even from there, you can start rewiring
Mm.
and making a change and shifting from the inside out.
Yeah, because the reason why that work is because human beings have great imagination. So be
Yeah.
curious and explore. And so, what if it's possible? I wonder if
Yeah.
I could do this. It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Samantha, for your time. I love our discussion, and I know that our audience are actually going to really enjoy it too. And it's so, so good. So, thank you so much for your time. You did amazing. Kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, this was so fun. I was a little nervous, but it was so fun. So thank you so much for having me. I
You
appreciate
did
it.
fantastic. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have a great day.
Bye.